Good morning, Europe. It is Friday, the 26th of August. I'm Helena Humphrey. Here are your top stories.
Ukraine's President Zelensky warns the world narrowly avoided a radiation incident after a temporary blackout following a fire near its Zaporizhzhia power plant yesterday. As the war in Ukraine enters its 7th month, Russian President Vladimir Putin orders the army to enlist 137,000 new recruits. And French President Emmanuel Macron arrives in Algeria for a 3-day trip aimed at healing the wounds of colonialism and boosting European gas supplies.
Fears of a potential nuclear disaster in Ukraine were ramped up on Thursday following a fire close to the Zaporizhzhia power plant that temporarily knocked it off the electrical grid. The plant's operator warned that electricity is vital to run the station's cooling systems for its reactors and spent fuel rods. The news will be of concern to the global nuclear watchdog, who are being called upon to inspect the facility.
We have to have all the security in the sense of physical security, not being shot at, aspects that need to be taken care of. This requires deconflicting a certain zone where we are going to be passing through. There's, on top of that, we have to determine exactly the terms of the mission, what we are going to be doing there with my experts when we get there.
Is very soon days or weeks?
Days.
Russia, whose forces currently occupy the plant, has blamed Ukraine for the incident.
We're now guarding not only the station, we are now protecting not only our own interests, the interests of the citizens of Donbass and Novorossiya, we are now protecting them all Europe, and one might say the whole world, because this accident, if it happens, will hit the whole world.
Russia has been accused by the West of using the plant as a missile launch site to bait the Ukrainians into returning fire. The US has called on Moscow to immediately cease its military operations at the plant and leave the area.
Russia and Ukraine have accused each other of using cluster bombs, weapons which often cause high civilian casualties by scattering small projectiles over a wide area. The Cluster Munition Coalition confirms that both sides have used them in the war.
What we find in Ukraine is that since the beginning of the invasion by Russia in February 2022, there's been hundreds of attacks of cluster munitions targeting civilian infrastructures, homes, hospitals, schools, and what we could have already seen with the numbers is that we have about 700 casualties of those attacks during the first half of the year, which is dramatic.
110 countries have ratified a convention which bans the use of cluster weapons. Kyiv and Moscow are not among them.
Both Russia and Ukraine should reject cluster munitions and join the international treaty banning them. Ukrainian forces appear to have used cluster munitions at least twice during this war.
Earlier, Russia accused Ukraine of having used small plastic mines in residential areas. All wars kill innocent people, but sadly some weapons pose a much greater risk to civilians than others.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is recruiting. He's ordered the army to increase its size by 137,000 personnel. The decree was announced a day after Moscow's war in Ukraine hit its 6-month mark. Published on the Kremlin website, it didn't explain where the new recruits will come from or why he was ordering the increase. Meanwhile, Russia's State Duma Council has called on Western countries to stop supplying heavy weapons to Ukraine. It claims that Kyiv is using them to kill and maim people and create a risk of a nuclear threat. And a Russian court has ordered the release from custody of a former mayor of the country's 4th largest city. This pending an investigation and trial on the charges he's facing for criticizing Moscow's military operation in Ukraine.
I want to say that eventually everything will be fine. Dark times are not forever. You already know that, but I'll voice it again just in case. Thank you for your support.
Western countries estimate that between 70 and 80,000 Russian troops have been killed or wounded since it first invaded Ukraine.
It's hard to atone for over a century of colonialization. But healing the wounds of the past is top on the French president's list on his 3-day visit to Algeria. Emmanuel Macron laid a wreath at the monument to the martyrs of independence, martyrs who died fighting France. It has been 60 years since Algeria became independent, with recent months being marked by tensions between the two governments. Meeting his counterpart, Abdelmajid Tebboune, in Algiers, Macron hopes to patch things up with its former colony, but economics plays a large part behind this trip too. Officially, the French leader's trip is oriented towards talking about young people and the future, but gas is the elephant in the room. Algeria has very large supplies of it, supplies which France and the rest of Europe is keen to have. And as the French government continues to heavily cap the price of energy at a huge cost to taxpayers, this need for gas is pressing.
The Spanish Parliament has approved the government's energy-saving rules as part of an EU-wide effort to reduce reliance on Russian gas. The measures, which were first applied on the 10th of August, affect everything, including shops, offices, cinemas and theatres.
Saving energy benefits everyone. It helps us to face Putin's energy blackmail. It's a saving for both domestic economies and the industrial sector. And it's a strategic action in the face of the challenge posed by climate change.
The German government is also introducing unprecedented measures to reduce gas consumption to avoid a crisis this winter. Starting from September, public buildings, apart from institutions like hospitals, are to be heated to a maximum of 19 degrees Celsius, and hot water will be switched off in such places. And while concrete proposals have not yet been laid out, Portugal is also planning on announcing energy-saving measures by the end of the month. It's asking businesses and industry to come up with ideas to help. The Croatian government, meanwhile, has tabled a bill lowering sales tax on the supply of wood chips, wood pellets and firewood to 5%, with a zero rate to be applied for solar panels.
The European Commission is continuing to scrutinise Hungary's latest proposals regarding the release of EU funds. Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government last week pledged to change 10 laws in order to fight corruption, among other things, so it can receive European money. Brussels has requested it do so as part of its dispute over rule of law concerns in Hungary. In April, the European Commission activated its so-called rule of law mechanism, which means EU funds can be held back if there are perceived to be systemic risks. According to one Hungarian cabinet minister, the government's position is the same on all these important issues. The Commission did not confirm this, but a spokesperson highlighted the areas of concern.
These include the failure to prevent unlawful decisions by public authorities, or the failure to ensure the absence of conflict of interests, or the limitation of effective investigation and prosecution of cases involving union funds.
One member of the European Parliament has asked the European Commission for its correspondence on the matter with the Hungarian government, but the release of the documents has so far been refused. That MEP is now warning that Budapest's promises about reforms have never come to fruition in the past.
Orban has been smart in the past about making people believe that he is willing to reform, but in the meantime he already prepares the next attack or the next big heist to steal money. So the Commission needs to be extremely cautious not to be played by Viktor Orban.
Hungary is the only country that the European Commission has activated the rule of law mechanism against. And it's the only country which hasn't had its pandemic recovery plans approved by Brussels, meaning no EU funds can be released. Because of rising energy prices and a flailing currency, Hungary has a huge budget deficit. After the April elections, the government started an austerity programme and now hopes to find an agreement with Brussels to get the cash as soon as possible. Christopher Pitchers, Euronews, Brussels.